The other is a sand media filter. Now this sounds a little divergent because we're trying to filter sand out and now we're using sand as the filter. That seems a little ironic, but it's a very small grain sand, and we put the water down through the sand, and the sand will capture all the little organic material that's coming through. It's going to capture the algae and the decomposed leaves and the decomposed stems and all the other stuff that's floating in the water and the weed seed and whatever else is out there. It's going to catch all that stuff. Now at the bottom there's a pervious membrane that traps the sand in the filter. Otherwise the sand would just drain right through. So there is a membrane at the bottom of the filter to keep the sand from just blowing on through. Now it is true a little bit escapes. So on the downstream side of sand media filters, it's quite often we have to put a screen filter to catch the residual sands that sneak through the sand media filter. So we have a dual filtration system, but hey, that's what you got to do to get the thing to work right. And it works very well. And you backflush to clean those filters, you simply run the water backwards through them. So you have to take water coming through one filter, backflush it through the other, and send that backflush water out and dispose of it. Just like we talked about with the disc filter. And those are probably the two most common. There's new generations of filters coming available all the time, and it's a matter, if you're working in the trade, to keep yourself updated, keep yourself familiar with what's available. The sales reps from the different manufacturers are going to be constantly bombarding you with their latest and greatest and best, and that's, you know, our job as people in the industry to keep abreast of what's new in the world of product, whatever it may be. But filtration is really an area that has got a long way to, I think there's a lot of development still to happen in filtration to make it maybe a little simpler and maybe a little better. Okay, mainline. Next step. After we get through the filtration, we go into a mainline.
I have one question.
Oh, yes.
Okay, say you flushed them out, back flushed them or did whatever. How often do you actually have to change the filter itself?
The question was, how often would you have to change a filter? You know, does it finally get contaminated enough to need to be changed? And it would definitely totally depend on the amount of debris that you're gathering. The disc filters, over time, they're going to wear just by velocity cutting across them. And as soon as there is enough wear to warrant it, you may have to change them. Certain conditions may never require them being changed, ever. Other conditions may require it on a as-needed basis. I don't really know how long that would be, operations-wise. It would totally depend on the amount of flow that you're consuming through them and, you know, all those variables. But yeah, there's a possibility they need to be traded out. Sand media filters, that sand eventually gets contaminated. And sometimes it might take a year, sometimes 2 years. It could be sometimes that filtration sand might last 5 years or longer. Again, totally dependent on the quality of the water coming into it, but it can get very rapidly contaminated if you're pumping lots and lots of algae particularly. And then you have, once it gets too crummy, you just got to trade it out and put new sand in. They just reload them. Now, for example, Boise Cascade's been pumping Columbia River water on trees down here at Wallula, pumping right out of the river, and they made 5 years with their sand. And they're running that system probably 120 days out of the year, something like that. So they're putting a lot of use on those filters. But the Columbia River is pretty cold water and it doesn't have a lot of algae in it. So it isn't a very high contaminated piece of delivery system. If you're in a warm water stream, boy, that can really change in a hurry. But they got 5 years out of their sand. And before it finally got to the point where it just was taking there was too short of cycles between flushes. You know, it gets to the point where that pressure differential starts happening twice as fast as it did when you had fresh sand in it. Well, you know, you're getting to the point you need to change out your sand.
Not always visual, is it?
Not necessarily visual. It will be more of a function of pressure over time. Pressure drop over time will dictate when your filters are really getting gummed up. Yeah. And also, what happens is they just start getting plugged. You know, the water doesn't pass through them as freely, and you start having pressure drop right after the flush. You still have a very high pressure drop in them. You know that you're in need of clean sand. Yeah. Any other filter questions? Yes.
It seems like we're the area where you would get the improvement, where maybe you could introduce some enzymes or something into that sand or something to increase the longevity of that.
Yeah, there are, you know, bacterial breakdown and things like that that can happen, but probably in this case the problem is that we're running so much water so fast and it's not being recycled that it takes organic solutions probably too long to act and react to it. That would be my best guess, but I'm sure that they're looking at that too. The possibility of certain enzymes to break down the organic material might work. You know, never say never. There's the darndest things that'll work.